Boker Tov, Baruch Hashem, it's good to be back. Thank you all who stepped up and helped with the minyan to make sure it ran smoothly. As usual, Israel was amazing, and Baruch Hashem, it's never good leaving, but it's good when you come back and you have an amazing community to rejoin. So to scale mitzvah, everyone, thank you. We're continuing now with the Halachot of Lashon Hara. We began before I left about clarifying misconceptions about the Heter of Ape Tlata. There's a rule that we spoke about before, that if your friends have friends, public information, we're discussing different ramifications, halachot, that pertain to that leniency, quote unquote. We see why it's in quote unquote, because it's not a full-on heter. There's many halachot that pertain to when you can repeat it, even public information. So category number 2 is borderline rechilut. Similarly, if someone repeats a statement to ploni that was said about him, that could be interpreted in 2 ways, such as in the case of Nura Bey Plania, the Gemara talks about there's a fire at such and such house. There's always a fire available by him, who is always cooking. The halakha is as follows. A, if the person clearly insinuates the negative understanding of the words, in essence, that the original speaker meant to say that Ploni is a glutton and is always throwing parties and eating. Again, there's a vague statement that was made. There's always a fire available by Ploni, by John. Now, if I go to John and say, by the way, this guy said this about you, and I say it in the negative, derogatory, in the way you can understand that to mean he's a glutton, he's always eating, then that's obviously Lashon Hara, or rather Rechilut, and prohibited, says the Chafetz Chaim. This is even true if you would have said it in front of the subject. This is when you're interpreting something to be derogatory, it's Rechilut. This type of statement considers avak rechilut, according to the Machloket mentioned above, that saying Nur Beplani with a negative a connotation may be actual Lashon Hara. Then to report back to the subject may be rechilut and not just avak rechilut. There's a Machloket Nachronim if this category is avak rechilut or real rechilut, but nevertheless it's asur. If you heard an ambiguous statement and you report back to the subject saying that was said about you, that's for sure asur. Category number 2 is if the speaker will stress the positive interpretation of the statement, in essence that he runs a large household or invites poor people and guests to his house. That way, when you say there's always a fire by John, it's not derogatory. You're saying, yeah, you're always hosting people, you're always cooking, you're doing a lot of chesed. However, if he knows that there's already bad blood between the two parties, or that the nature of the listener, who is the subject of the rechilut, is to be a nirgan, who is always looking at the negative side of things and will automatically grasp the negative connotation of these words and will be insulted, then it is asur to relate this conversation to him. And then category number 3, we'll wrap up with this for today. If the speaker is always ambiguous, the subject, the planya, the John in our example, is always in the middle. He doesn't have any bad beef meat with anyone. He doesn't necessarily care, which neither leans towards positive or negative. The Chafetz Chaim rules that its permissibility would depend upon if the speaker would be willing to make his statement in front of 3 people, or including the original speaker, or not. This is the idea that you say, I would have said it in front of him. It's not a carte blanche heter. Just because you would say something in front of the subject doesn't mean it's mutar. The Chafetz Chaim only brings it down if the original statement was ambiguous and the listener, the subject, doesn't always assume negative. Then, if you would have said, this guy's always cooking, and the listener, John, you're like, yeah, I do chesed, that's fine. In that scenario, you can rely on this leniency that I would have said it in front of him regardless. Additionally, listener may accept the information since it's not rechilut. This is the 3rd category again. This is all borderline rechilut. We'll continue with these halachot tomorrow. Have a wonderful night. Chazak u'baruch.